You know that feeling when you open your banking app and you already kind of know what you're about to see, so you hesitate for half a second before actually looking? Like you're bracing for impact. And sometimes it's not even that bad. It's just low enough to make you uncomfortable. Low enough that every decision suddenly feels heavier. Can I afford this? Should I wait? What if something happens? And the weird thing is, most people think that feeling only goes away once you're making a lot of money. Like once you hit 6 figures, or once you finally feel successful. But that's not actually true. There's a much smaller number where something really important changes, and almost nobody talks about it. That number is $1,000. Not 10,000, not 20, just $1,000. And yeah, I know that sounds almost too small. Like, how could that possibly matter? But stick with me for a second, because this number does something way bigger than people realize. My name's Mike, and I spend way too much time thinking about money and personal finance. If that's something you're into as well, feel free to like the video or subscribe. I post stuff like this pretty regularly. Alright, so let's talk about what actually changes at $1,000. Because it's not what people think. Most people hear emergency fund and immediately picture something huge. 3 months of expenses, 6 months, a year. And that idea alone is enough to make people give up before they even start. But here's the thing. Your brain doesn't need security. It needs relief. And $1,000 is the first time most people feel that relief. Before $1,000, your brain is in what I'd call constant alert mode. Every little thing feels like a potential disaster. Your phone glitches, your car makes a noise, your laptop freezes, you get a weird email from work. None of these are emergencies, but your body reacts like they are. Your heart rate goes up, your mind starts racing. You start doing mental math you didn't ask for. And that's not because you're bad with money. It's because your brain doesn't see any margin. When you have zero buffer, every problem feels personal. But when you hit $1,000, something subtle happens. You don't feel rich, you don't feel accomplished. You feel quieter. Like there's finally a pause between something going wrong and panic kicking in. And that pause is everything. Think about it this way. Before $1,000, if your tire blows out, the question is, how am I going to survive this? After $1,000, the question becomes, okay, annoying, what's the best way to handle this? Same problem, completely different experience. And that's the first rule of the $1,000 milestone. It doesn't change your life. It changes how your brain reacts to life. Most people don't realize how much energy they're burning just worrying about what might happen. And when that worry goes away, even a little, it frees up mental space. That's why people with a small emergency fund often start making better decisions without even trying. They sleep better, they're less reactive, they don't jump at the first bad option, because fear isn't driving every choice anymore. Now here's where this gets interesting. The real power of $1,000 has nothing to do with the money itself. It's what saving that money proves to you. If you managed to save $1,000, you did something most people never do. You broke the cycle. You interrupted the pattern of money coming in and immediately going out. You showed yourself that money can pause. And once you see that pause, you can't unsee it. Before $1,000, money feels like water running through your hands. It shows up and then it's gone. After $1,000, money starts to feel controllable. Not abundant, not impressive, just controllable. And that's a massive identity shift. Because now you're no longer someone who can't save. You're someone who already has. And your brain treats those two identities very differently. People think confidence comes from big wins, but confidence actually comes from small proof. Proof that you can follow through. Proof that you can delay gratification. Proof that you don't have to panic at every inconvenience. That's what $1,000 really buys you. Not stuff, not freedom, but proof. And that proof changes how you move through the world. You start saying no more easily. You don't feel as desperate. You don't take the first option just because it's there. And desperation is expensive. It makes you overpay. It makes you accept bad deals. It keeps you stuck. The moment desperation eases up, even slightly, your options expand. Here's another thing most people don't talk about. Once you have $1,000 saved, you stop obsessing over every tiny purchase. Not because you stop caring, but because your brain knows you're not one mistake away from collapse. That decision fatigue fades. You're not calculating every coffee, every grocery item, every subscription in your head all day. And when that mental noise goes down, your focus goes up. That's why people often feel more productive once their finances stabilize a bit. It's not motivation, it's bandwidth. Now, a lot of people mess this up right here. They hit $1,000 and immediately spend it. They tell themselves they earned it. They upgrade something, they book a trip, they treat it like a reward. And I get it, but $1,000 isn't a reward. It's a line. It's the first line between chaos and control. Once you cross it, your job isn't to celebrate, it's to protect it. Because the second you drop back to zero, your brain snaps right back into survival mode. That calm disappears fast. The goal of the $1,000 rule isn't growth, it's stability. Growth comes later. And this is where people underestimate how powerful this stage is. If you can build and hold $1,000, you can build anything else. Because the hardest part of money isn't math, it's behavior. Saving your first $1,000 teaches you how to say no, to wait, to plan, to recover from setbacks without quitting. Those skills compound way faster than money ever will. Most people think they'll start being responsible after they make more money. But in reality, the people who become stable are the ones who learned control when the numbers were still small. $1,000 is where that learning starts. It's not flashy, it's not impressive on Instagram, but it's real. And if you're sitting there thinking, yeah, but I can't even save that, that's exactly why this matters. You don't need to save it fast. You just need to save it once. $50 at a time, $20, whatever. The speed doesn't matter. The identity shift does. Because once you become someone who has a buffer, you start acting like someone who deserves one. And that version of you makes very different choices. Look, $1,000 won't fix your life, but it will stop your life from constantly feeling like it's about to break. And that alone is worth more than most people realize. And this is the part nobody really tells you. Because once you have that first $1,000 saved, the question stops being, can I save money? And it quietly becomes, what do I do now that I'm not panicking anymore? This is where things get a little uncomfortable. Because a lot of people assume that once the stress goes away, motivation automatically shows up. Like calm equals clarity. And that's not always true. What actually happens for a lot of people is this weird in-between phase. You're not stressed anymore, but you're also not really moving forward yet. You're stable, but stuck. And that's normal. Nobody warns you about this part. Before $1,000, fear pushes you. After $1,000, fear steps back. And when fear steps back, something else has to step in. Intentionality. This is where the $1,000 rule stops being about money and starts being about direction. Because now you finally have the mental space to ask better questions. Not how do I survive this month, but what actually matters to me? What am I trying to build? What do I want my life to look like a year from now? And these questions can feel heavier than money stress, because you can't blame circumstances anymore. You have breathing room now, which means the next moves are on you. This is also why some people subconsciously sabotage their savings. They'll dip back below $1,000 for no real reason, not because they need to, but because stability forces honesty, and honesty can be uncomfortable. Once you're not constantly reacting, you start noticing patterns, like how often you distract yourself, how often you avoid hard decisions, how much time you spend busy instead of building. Money was never the real issue there. It was just loud enough to hide everything else. And this is where the people who actually move forward separate from the people who stall. The ones who move forward don't immediately chase bigger numbers. They don't rush into investing. They don't jump into risky plays. They use the $1,000 buffer as a stability anchor. They treat it like a floor, not a stepping stone. Because once you know you can handle small emergencies, you start noticing where your money is quietly leaking. Not in dramatic ways, but in invisible ones. Subscriptions you forgot about, convenience spending, tiny habits that don't feel expensive but add up emotionally. Before $1,000, you avoid looking at your finances because it's stressful. After $1,000, you start looking because it feels empowering. You're not checking to see how bad things are. You're checking because you're curious. That curiosity is what leads to growth. And once curiosity replaces fear, progress becomes a lot more sustainable. This is also when your relationship with work starts to change. Not dramatically, but subtly. You stop tolerating nonsense as much. You don't feel like every paycheck is a lifeline. And that changes how you show up. You speak more confidently. You negotiate a little harder. Not because you're arrogant, but because you're not desperate. And desperation is loud. It shows up in your voice, your posture, your decisions. People can feel it. The absence of desperation is even louder. And the crazy part is, you don't need to use the money for it to work. Just knowing it's there changes your behavior. That's the real emergency fund effect. It's psychological insurance. Now, here's something I wish more people understood. The jump from $0 to $1,000 is harder than the jump from $1,000 to $5,000. Not mathematically, mentally. Because the first 1,000 requires you to change how you see yourself. After that, you're just repeating behavior. That's why so many people say, once I started saving, it got easier. It's not magic. It's identity alignment. You're no longer fighting who you are. You're reinforcing it. And once that happens, you start trusting yourself more. You trust that you'll handle problems. You trust that you won't completely fall apart. You trust that setbacks won't erase you. That trust is what allows long-term thinking. Without it, everything feels urgent, and urgent thinking kills progress. So if you're watching this and you're still trying to hit your first $1,000, don't rush past it. Don't tell yourself it doesn't matter because it's not enough. It matters because it changes how your brain works. It matters because it buys you calm. And calm is where good decisions come from. Everything else people talk about, investing, wealth, freedom, options, those are second-order effects. The first-order effect is this. You stop living like one mistake will ruin you. And that alone changes everything. And this is where the story really changes. Because once you've had calm, and once you've had stability, you start to notice something kind of unsettling. Your life didn't magically fix itself. You didn't wake up feeling motivated every morning. What did change is subtler. You stopped lying to yourself. And that's uncomfortable. Because when money stress isn't screaming in your ear anymore, you can actually hear your own thoughts. And a lot of people don't like what they hear at first. They realize how much time they waste, how often they procrastinate. Before, money was the excuse. Now it's gone. And that's where momentum either starts or dies. This is the fork in the road. Some people use the $1,000 buffer as a place to rest. Others use it as a platform. The ones who rest feel safe but stagnant. The ones who build momentum start asking better questions. Not big dramatic questions like, what's my purpose? But small practical ones. What's the easiest thing I could fix next? What's the one habit that drains me the most? What's the thing I keep avoiding because it feels annoying, not scary? Momentum doesn't come from ambition. It comes from friction removal. Once your finances aren't constantly rubbing against you, you start noticing other sources of friction. Your schedule, your environment, your routines, your energy. And this is where the $1,000 rule quietly turns into a time rule. Because money bought you calm. Calm gives you awareness. Awareness shows you where your time is leaking. Most people think productivity starts with motivation. It doesn't. It starts when you're not exhausted from worrying. That's why people with a small financial buffer often become sharper without trying. They're not smarter, they're just less overloaded. And when overload disappears, momentum becomes possible. This is also when something interesting happens with goals. Before $1,000, goals feel abstract. I want to save more. I want to earn more. I want to do better. After $1,000, goals become tangible. I want $2,000. I want 1 month of expenses. I want to not hate Monday mornings. You stop chasing numbers for ego. You start chasing outcomes that improve your day-to-day life. And that's when consistency kicks in. Not discipline, consistency. Discipline is loud and exhausting. Consistency is quiet and boring, but it works. This is also where people finally understand why so many financial hacks never worked before. Budgeting apps, spreadsheets, rules, systems. None of them failed because they were bad. They failed because you tried to build structure on top of chaos. $1,000 removes the chaos. Now structure actually sticks. And here's a weird but important point. Once you have momentum, progress stops feeling emotional. You're not hyped, you're not inspired, you're just moving. And that's when things compound. Not just money. Confidence compounds, trust in yourself compounds, follow-through compounds. You stop needing external motivation because you've seen proof. You've already done the hardest part. You've already built something from nothing. And that's when the $1,000 rule quietly turns into something else entirely. It becomes a filter. You stop asking, can I afford this? And start asking, does this move me forward? Time, energy, money. Same filter. And once that filter exists, life starts to feel less chaotic. Not easier, just clearer. You know what matters. You know what doesn't. You know what you're willing to trade for progress. And most people never reach this stage. Not because they're lazy, but because they never got out of survival long enough to see it. That's why the $1,000 rule matters so much. It's not the end goal. It's the moment your life stops being reactive. From here, $5,000 makes sense. $10,000 makes sense. Long-term plans make sense. Before this, they were just ideas. After this, they're steps. So if you're watching this and you're somewhere in the middle, maybe you have a few hundred saved, maybe you hit $1,000 once and fell back, maybe you're close and doubting whether it's even worth it. It is. Not because of what the money buys, but because of who you become once fear stops running the show. Build the buffer. Protect it. Use the calm. Momentum comes next, and once momentum starts, everything else gets easier to build.